The autumn air in Emmerdale had turned sharp and predatory. It was an evening that clung to the stone cottages like a shroud, the dying light of the day bleeding out across the moors in hues of bruised purple and angry orange. This was not the peaceful twilight of a village at rest. It was not the peaceful twilight of a village at rest. It was a held breath, a moment of profound and unsettling stillness before the inevitable storm. In three separate corners of this seemingly idyllic world, three lives were careening towards a precipice, their fates unknowingly tangled in a web spun by violence, desperation, and the ghosts of the past. Desperation, and the ghosts of the past. For young April Windsor, the world had shrunk to the size of a suffocating cage. The vibrant, hopeful girl was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed ghost haunted by the chilling commands of her handlers, the deceptively avuncular Ray and the venomous Celia. They were not mere criminals, they were soul thieves, and they were methodically stripping away every piece of her childhood, leaving only a shivering, terrified automaton in their wake. Leaving only a shivering, terrified automaton in their wake. The grim task they had assigned her today was not just a command, it was a branding, a searing mark of ownership. The threat was not spoken in hypotheticals but in cold, hard certainties: please the client, or you will never see Dylan again. The words were a physical weight, pressing down on her chest, stealing the very air from her lungs. Stealing the very air from her lungs. She stood before her bedroom mirror, a stranger staring back at her. The dress they had made her wear was a mockery of youth, its fabric feeling like a second skin she wanted to claw off. It was the costume for a role she never auditioned for, in a play written by monsters. When she ran into Celia in the hallway, the woman's performance was chillingly perfect. To the outside world, they were strangers, a polite nod, a meaningless smile. But the moment they were alone, the mask dropped, and the serpent beneath was revealed. Celia's fingers, cold and strong, gripped April's arm. "Don't you dare ruin this," she hissed, her voice a low poison. "Last time was a mistake. This time, you will be perfect." Perfection. The word was a death sentence. You will be perfect. Perfection. The word was a death sentence. April's journey to meet the client was a walk through a nightmare. Every familiar corner of the village felt alien, every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe with unseen threats. The destination was a sterile, impersonal hotel room on the outskirts of town, a place designed for anonymity and transient secrets. The man who opened the door introduced himself as Callum. He had a predator's smile, one that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. He appraised her not as a person, but as a purchase, a thing to be consumed. "They told me you were young," he smirked, his gaze lingering on her face. Her dress. A knot of pure ice formed in April's stomach. "I'm 16, she managed to say, the words feeling like a desperate plea. Callum chuckled, a low, guttural sound that made her skin crawl. "You look even younger." "You look even younger." Every instinct screamed at her to run, to bolt from that room and never look back. She took a half step towards the door, a desperate, primal urge for flight. But Callum's voice cut through her panic, sharp and cruel as a shard of glass. "You leave, and I demand my money back. And you know who will pay the price for that, don't you?" Little Dylan. He didn't have to raise his voice. He had her, and he knew it. She was trapped, a fly caught in a spider's web, and the spider was beginning to move. He relished his power, dragging out the meeting, pouring himself a drink from a vodka bottle on the table while April's 1-hour time frame ticked away like a time bomb. He saw her fear and it fed his arrogance, a fatal miscalculation. He saw a child, helpless and broken. He failed to see the cornered animal, the desperate survivor who had nothing left to lose. The turning point came when he moved towards her, his intentions finally laid bare. "I've waited long enough," he growled, his voice thick with a repulsive desire. "No," April whispered, the word barely audible. I can't do this." "You have no say in the matter," he snapped, his smile vanishing, replaced by a mask of brutal entitlement. He crossed the room in 2 strides and the heavy click of the lock echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "I paid far too much to let this opportunity go." He blocked her exit, a mountain of menace. The air was thick with the scent of his cologne and the stale alcohol on his breath. It was in that moment that something inside April snapped. The fear did not vanish, but it was consumed by a white-hot surge of pure, unadulterated rage. It was a rage for Dylan, for her stolen innocence, for the girl in the mirror she no longer recognized. Her eyes, wide with terror, darted around the room, searching for a weapon, for any hope of escape. They landed on the vodka bottle, half full, gleaming under the dim hotel light. Time seemed to slow down. She could hear the blood pounding in her ears, a frantic drumbeat of survival. As Callum reached for her, she moved. It wasn't a conscious thought, it was a primal reaction. Her hand, trembling but sure, closed around the cool, smooth glass of the bottleneck. She swung it with every ounce of strength she possessed, a desperate, arcing blow fueled by terror and fury. A desperate, arcing blow fueled by terror and fury. The sound was sickeningly final. A wet, percussive thud followed by the sharp crack of splintering bone. The bottle didn't shatter. It connected with his temple with devastating force. Callum's eyes went wide, a flicker of shock and disbelief replacing the lustful arrogance. A single, choked gasp escaped his lips before his body went limp, collapsing to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. He landed in a heap, motionless. Floor like a puppet with its strings cut. He landed in a heap, motionless. The silence that followed was absolute, a deafening void where violence had just been. April stood panting, the heavy bottle still clutched in her hand. Her gaze fell upon Callum's still form. And then she saw it. A thin, glistening stream of crimson began to trickle from the wound on his head, a dark river of life seeping into the cheap hotel carpet. A dark river of life seeping into the cheap hotel carpet. Did he survive? The question was irrelevant in that moment. What mattered was the chilling certainty that April Windsor's life had just become infinitely more complicated, a labyrinth of secrets and blood from which there might be no escape. She dropped the bottle, the clatter on the floor startling her back to reality. The clatter on the floor startling her back to reality. She scrambled for the door, her fingers fumbling with the lock. She didn't look back. She ran. She ran out into the cold night air, not as a victim, but as something new, something terrifying. She ran from the room, from the body, from the irrevocable act that would forever define her. The question was no longer if her life was ruined, but how many others she would drag down into the abyss with her. Life was ruined, but how many others she would drag down into the abyss with her. Miles away from the silent, bloodstained hotel room, another man was wrestling with ghosts of his own. Michael Parr, the actor who had given life to the volatile and charismatic Ross Barton, was reflecting on a year that had been a whirlwind of professional triumph and profound personal change. His return to the Dales had been explosive, a baptism by fire in an underground boxing ring against Billy Fletcher, reigniting old rivalries and forging new, uneasy alliances. Reigniting old rivalries and forging new, uneasy alliances. He sat in the quiet of his living room, the glow of his phone illuminating his face. His daughter, Susie, was sleeping soundly in her crib upstairs, a small, perfect symbol of his new life. He scrolled through his Instagram feed, looking at the photo he had just posted, a still from that brutal boxing match, his face a mask of sweat and determination. 1 year since Ross returned, he had written. What a year it's been. Feeling so lucky and grateful. He had written. What a year it's been. Feeling so lucky and grateful. The words were true, but they felt like a thin veneer over a much more complex reality. The flood of praise in the comments from fans and co-stars was heartwarming. Bradley Rich's comment, "Has to be the brother Bond love you," brought a genuine smile to his face. He remembered the raw, often brutal, but ultimately unbreakable bond he'd shared with his on-screen brothers. Yet, the praise also served as a stark reminder of the man he used to be, and the man his character, Ross, still was at his core a man forged in violence and loss, and the man his character, Ross, still was at his core a man forged in violence and loss. He thought back to his first stint on the show. At 26, it was all about the adrenaline rush, on-screen and off. The nightclubs, the pints after a long day of filming, the chaotic energy of a young man finding his way in the world. Now, at 36, his world was one of tea and early nights, of whispered lullabies and the profound, terrifying responsibility of being a father. He was stepping into dad mode, and the transition was both beautiful and jarring. He was stepping into dad mode, and the transition was both beautiful and jarring. His return to Emmerdale was not just a job, it was a confrontation with his past. Ross Barton had left the village a broken man, his face and spirit scarred by a horrific acid attack, seeking a new life with Rebecca White. But the Dales had a gravitational pull, a way of drawing its lost souls back into the fold. And his return was not a quiet one. The darkness that had always clung to Ross was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. The darkness that had always clung to Ross was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. He had found a surprising, fragile bond with April Windsor, seeing in her a vulnerability that mirrored his own past traumas. He'd tried to be a protector, a confidant, especially after she learned the devastating truth about her mother Donna's death. But even his attempts at normalcy were fraught with chaos. His whirlwind romance with Steph Milligan had crashed and burned, a casualty of his own self-destructive tendencies and a one-night stand with Manpreet Sharma. Looking at the photo again, at the savage intensity in Ross Barton's eyes, Michael felt a shiver of unease. He was an actor, and Ross was a character. But sometimes, the line between them blurred. The rage, the pain, the capacity for violence he could tap into it, Channel it for the camera. But where did it come from? Channel it for the camera. But where did it come from? He thought of the acid attack, an act of such profound cruelty arranged by Debbie Dingle, a woman he had once loved. He thought of Joe Tate, the intended target, who had also, by some cruel twist of fate, returned to the village. The past was never truly gone in Emmerdale. It was a living, breathing entity that stalked the cobblestone streets. It was a living, breathing entity that stalked the cobblestone streets. As he put his phone down, the house was silent save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. But in his mind, the echoes were deafening. The roar of the crowd at the boxing match, the sizzle of acid on skin, the ghost of his brother Finn, the weight of 100 bad decisions. He was grateful for his new life, for his daughter, for the peace he had found. For his new life, for his daughter, for the peace he had found. But a part of him, the part that was inextricably linked with Ross Barton, knew that in a place like Emmerdale, peace was always temporary. It was a fleeting truce in a never-ending war. And as April Windsor ran terrified through the night, a new battle was beginning, one that would inevitably draw in the village's most damaged and dangerous souls. Ross Barton's capacity for darkness might be needed sooner than he thought. Ross Barton's capacity for darkness might be needed sooner than he thought. While April fled from a scene of violence and Ross contemplated his past, another soul was adrift in a wilderness far more desolate than any physical landscape. Beowulf, the gruff but gentle patriarch, the man with a poet's heart hidden beneath a wrestler's exterior, had simply vanished. To his son, Paddy Kirk, he was on a long overdue visit to a friend in Ireland, a convenient fiction that soothed a guilty conscience. The truth was infinitely more tragic. Convenient fiction that soothed a guilty conscience. The truth was infinitely more tragic. Bear was a forgotten man, living out of a hired car parked in a quiet, anonymous field. The tension with Paddy, the unspoken feeling of being a burden, had wounded him more deeply than he could ever admit. His planned escape to Ireland had collapsed when his friend cancelled, leaving him stranded, not just without a destination, but without a purpose. Not just without a destination, but without a purpose. Convinced he was unwelcome everywhere, he had just driven not towards the sea, but into a void of his own making. For weeks, he had been living on the margins, his car a cramped and lonely sanctuary, filled with the meager remnants of his life. He was a ghost haunting the edges of his own existence, a heartbreakingly common fate for a generation so often rendered invisible. Breakingly common fate for a generation so often rendered invisible. The November special, the standalone episode that would finally reveal the mystery of his 100 missing days, was set to be a journey into a quiet, creeping horror. It began not with a dramatic event, but with a slow, grinding erosion of hope. Bear's car, once a symbol of freedom, became his prison. His money dwindled. The cold began to seep into his bones. Loneliness became a constant, suffocating companion. His bones. Loneliness became a constant, suffocating companion. The turning point, the moment his quiet tragedy spiraled into something far more sinister, came on a rain-lashed afternoon. The car wouldn't start. The battery was dead. He was miles from anywhere, soaked to the skin, and utterly defeated. It was then that a sleek, dark vehicle pulled up alongside him. The window slid down to reveal the face of Ray Walters. Beside him. The window slid down to reveal the face of Ray Walters. To Bear, Ray was a savior. He offered a warm smile, a flask of hot coffee, and a promise of help. He spoke of a place nearby where Bear could get a hot meal and stay for the night while he arranged for a mechanic. He seemed kind, charismatic, the sort of man who helps strangers out of the goodness of his heart. Bear, desperate and seeing no other option, accepted. It was the most catastrophic mistake of his life. Accepted. It was the most catastrophic mistake of his life. Ray's place was a secluded farmhouse, set far back from the main road, surrounded by dense woods. It was isolated, and as Bear would soon discover, it was a cage. The initial warmth and hospitality felt genuine. Ray introduced him to Celia, who played the part of a caring hostess, plying him with food and concern. But Bear, for all his simplicity, was observant. He noticed things. The way the few other people on the property seemed nervous, their eyes darting around, their conversations falling silent whenever Ray or Celia entered a room. He noticed the heavy-duty locks on doors that should have been open. He overheard snippets of hushed conversations about shipments and cargo, words that sounded chillingly out of place on a quiet farm. The actor Joe Absalom, who portrayed the villainous Ray, knew that the key to his character was this veneer of charm. Ray's evil was not theatrical, it was insidious. His involvement in the special episode was the missing piece of the puzzle. Ray saw in the world a reflection of his own broken past. Adopted at 8 by the manipulative Celia, he never had the family life he craved, the one he now saw and envied in people like Laurel. His connection with Bear was not born of kindness, but of opportunity. His connection with Bear was not born of kindness, but of opportunity. The revelation would be gradual, a slow dawning horror. The special episode would show Bear, one evening, looking for a bathroom and accidentally opening the wrong door. Inside, for a fleeting moment, he would see a group of pale, terrified young men and women, huddled together in the dark. One of them, a young woman with haunted eyes, would look at him, her expression a silent scream for help. The door would be slammed shut by one of Ray's menacing associates, but the image would be seared into Bear's mind. He slammed shut by one of Ray's menacing associates, but the image would be seared into Bear's mind. This was the connection to the serious real-world issue actor Joshua Richards had hinted at. The play he had once starred in, Sold, was about human trafficking. Emmerdale was about to descend into that same dark world. Ray and Celia were not just drug dealers, they were traffickers, and Bear had unwittingly stumbled into the heart of their operation. When Bear confronted Ray, demanding to know what was going on, the mask of the friendly savior would finally drop. Ray's smile would turn to ice. "You're a good man, Bear," he'd say, his voice dangerously calm. "But good men are a liability when they see things they shouldn't." From that moment on, Bear was no longer a guest, he was a prisoner. His car keys vanished. His phone was lost. He was told the roads were flooded, that the mechanic was delayed. Every excuse was a bar on his cage. The farmhouse, once a refuge, was now a place of silent, mounting terror. He was trapped, a witness to unspeakable evil, his own quiet despair now entangled in a much larger, more violent web of exploitation. The question of where did Bear go? Was about to be answered in the most horrifying way imaginable. He had fallen into the grasp of a new kind of monster, and the Dales would be shaken to their very foundations when the truth of his 100 missing days was finally revealed. The night air that April Windsor gulped down as she fled the hotel was not cleansing, it was thick with the metallic tang of her own panic. She didn't stop running until her lungs burned and her legs gave out, collapsing in a heap in a darkened alleyway behind the Woolpack. Her mind was a chaotic storm of images: Callum's leering face, the weight of the bottle, the sound of his skull cracking, the sight of his blood pooling on the floor. She was covered in a cold sweat, shivering uncontrollably, not from the cold, but from the shockwave of her own actions. Her first instinct is to find her father, Marlon. She stumbles through the back door of the pub, a mass of tears and terror. Marlon and Rona are closing up, their casual end-of-day chatter dying on their lips the moment they see her. April's face is ashen, her eyes wide with a horror they have never seen before. "April? My God, what happened to you?" Marlon rushes to her side. "My God, what happened to you?" Marlon rushes to her side. Through ragged, choked sobs, the story tumbles out. Not all of it, not the part about Ray and Celia and Dylan, but the core of it. "There was a man. In a hotel. He wouldn't let me leave. He tried to hurt me." She can't bring herself to say what she did. Instead, she holds up her hand, and in the dim pub light, they see it, a tiny, dark speck of Callum's blood under her fingernail. I think I killed him." Speck of Callum's blood under her fingernail. I think I killed him." The words hang in the air, heavy and poisonous. Marlon's world tilts on its axis. His daughter, his sweet, innocent April, is talking about killing a man. His immediate reaction is protective, primal. He pulls her into a fierce hug, his mind racing. Go to the police? But what would they say? Go to the police? But what would they say? What story would she tell? How could he explain what his 16-year-old daughter was doing in a hotel room with a strange man without revealing the larger, more dangerous secret that could get Dylan killed? The complication the original transcript hinted at is now a living, breathing monster in the room with them. At the hotel, a cleaner on the late shift discovers the scene. The police are called. The room is a flurry of forensic activity. DCI Harrison leads the investigation. Callum is not dead, but he's close. He's rushed to the hospital, unconscious, with a severe skull fracture and swelling on the brain, a ticking time bomb. His chances are slim. The crime scene yields immediate clues. The vodka bottle, wiped clean of prints in a panic, but not perfectly. A single, partial print belonging to April is found on a shard of glass near the body. They also find her bag, which she dropped in her haste to flee. Inside is her wallet, her ID. Within hours, the police have a name, her ID. April Windsor. A 16-year-old girl. It doesn't make sense. DCI Harrison, a man who has seen the worst of humanity, knows that a scene like this is never simple. Why was she there? Who is this man, Callum? A background check reveals Callum has minor priors, But more disturbingly, known associations with a criminal element on the periphery of the city, a network the police have been trying to penetrate for months. Element on the periphery of the city, a network the police have been trying to penetrate for months. News travels fast in a small town, but it travels even faster in the criminal underworld. Ray Walters is meeting with a contact when his phone buzzes. The news is clipped and urgent. Callum's been put in the hospital. Some girl cracked his skull open. The police are involved. Cracked his skull open. The police are involved. Ray's face remains impassive, but his eyes turn to chips of ice. Callum was a client, a mid-level player who paid for the services Ray and Celia provided. An attack on a client is bad for business. A police investigation is worse. It's a loose thread that could unravel his entire operation. He looks at Celia. His entire operation. He looks at Celia. "We have a problem," he says, his voice dangerously low. "A new problem. A little girl with a vodka bottle. The police have her name. April Windsor." Celia's composure cracks for a fraction of a second. "The girl from tonight? I told you she was trouble." "The girl from tonight? I told you she was trouble." "Find out everything about her," Ray commands his associate. "Her family, her friends, where she is right now. We need to get to her before the police do. We need to control this narrative. And we need to make sure that when or if Callum wakes up, he tells the right story." The unspoken thread is clear. April is now a liability that must be managed, or eliminated. April is now a liability that must be managed, or eliminated. Our final moments cut between our three escalating storylines. A montage of rising tension in Bear's prison. The farmhouse is quiet. He is locked in a damp, cold cellar. He has discovered he is not alone. The young woman with the haunted eyes from the other room has been thrown in with him, a punishment for some minor infraction. Thrown in with him, a punishment for some minor infraction. She is terrified, speaks broken English, and her name is Anya. She is the proof of the trafficking ring the Anna viewers have wondered about. Suddenly, they hear heavy footsteps on the stairs. The lock rattles. Bear stands up, placing himself protectively in front of the girl as the door creaks open, revealing the silhouette of one of Ray's thugs. Door creaks open, revealing the silhouette of one of Ray's thugs. In his home, Ross Barton is rocking his daughter back to sleep. He looks down at her innocent face and feels a wave of love so fierce it almost hurts. His phone buzzes. It's a text from Marlon, a desperate, frantic message. "Mate, I need you. It's April. Something terrible has happened." Ross looks from his sleeping child to the desperate message. He feels the old, familiar pull of violence and loyalty, the world he tried to leave behind, calling him back. The pull of violence and loyalty, the world he tried to leave behind, calling him back. The Dingle Barton farm. Marlon has made a decision. He can't go to the police, not yet. He's hiding April, keeping her safe. He's pacing the kitchen like a caged animal when he sees it, a dark car, parked at the end of their lane, its headlights off. It's just sitting there, watching. He knows, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that they've been found. Not by the police, but by something far worse. That they've been found. Not by the police, but by something far worse. The final shot, DCI Harrison's police car pulls up to the Dingle Barton farm. He's come to question a 16-year-old girl about a brutal assault. He gets out of his car, his face grim. As he walks towards the front door, the camera pans to the other end of the lane, where Ray's car sits in the shadows, its occupants watching the police arrive. The trap is closing. April is caught between the law and the lawless, with her family and the few people who care for her standing in the crossfire. The episode ends. The storm has not just arrived, it has made landfall, and the lives of everyone in Emmerdale are about to be swept away by the brutal, unforgiving tide. It has made landfall, and the lives of everyone in Emmerdale are about to be swept away by the brutal, unforgiving tide.